Chess is a battle on a board. There can only be one winner.
Welcome back. Before we pick up the thread of Emma's story, I want to send out a special shout out to a very special listener, a very special young lady, wise beyond her years and wonderfully feisty. You'd never believe she's only in the 3rd grade. She's an Emma in waiting, my great niece, Asa. Thanks for listening, darling Asa, to your old auntie. In the previous episode, The Mentor, we looked at proof of the close relationship between Emma and Alwyn. When I put the pieces together, there was little doubt in my mind that Alwyn was mentor to Emma, and I'm quite sure she needed one. We know from history that Ethelred the Unready was not the most faithful of creatures. That was also true in his personal life. The Chronicle tells us that he often shunned his queens and took up with unworthy favorites. Let's return to Falaise Castle in Normandy, not long after Christmas and Twelfth Night. Almost time for the king, queen, and their children to return to England and war. This is how Alwyn might have been a mentor to Emma at one of the most crucial times in her life. And what better method would he use than chess for the game? My father and brother were gone. My marriage was broken. The strength of spirit which had taken me so far seemed to have left me. Where had it gone? Here in Normandy? And happier times when I had a real family and a home? Could I find it? Could I know myself again? Near the hearth, I sat down at my mother's frame and scroll and ran my hand across unfinished work. It had been many weeks since I'd stitched. With the future of my bloodline to think about, it seemed frivolity. I looked up at the great tapestry of the House of Normandy. "Oh, Mother," I mused aloud, "you said stitching would lift my burdens, if only for a little while." I closed my eyes at the sound of her voice. "Do not worry, my daughter. Your work will be there, waiting. Even put away a long time, come back to it. No one will do it for you. It is you who must finish it. Trust the needle." It was only as I began the work that I came to remember myself. And remember my first chess lesson from my dear tutor, my mentor, Alwyn, and the wisdom he never failed to impart in every game we shared. I smiled as I savored the quiet of this great house at the end of a busy day. My heart was full as I climbed the stairs to the great chamber. I walked along the upper hall and stopped suddenly. I heard noises from behind the double doors to the great chamber. Stifled giggles and muffled moans, a creaking bed. A knife-like stab stopped my heart and roiled my stomach. It could not be. I grasped the door handles and swung them open. There was my husband, tangled in the bed covers with a young woman. I stood still, my palm clutching the door handle. "My lord," I stated with calm I barely possessed, "I see you have company." "Emma," Ethelred called out in ragged breaths. "You are unready for war, my husband," my words cold as ice. "But seems you are ready for other things." His companion wrapped the coverlet around herself and with her eyes down scurried past me through the doors. I stood silently in an effort to steel myself for what was to come. I pushed the doors back, not caring if they closed. "How dare you?" "Emma, I warn you." "You warn me? How dare you sully my name?" I struggled to keep a lid on my rage. "This is my house. My children are here." "Where were you when I needed comfort?" Ethelred spat out in petulance. "I must find love where I can." He tossed his words at me. "Love?" I spat out. "Love, is it? You do not know the meaning." Hot tears pooled my eyes. The last years flashed before my eyes, painting moving pictures in my mind. Our first happy days, his generosity giving way to cowardice, the birth of our children overshadowed by massacre of the innocents. I suddenly snapped back to the present, composing myself, then stepped toward the doors. "No more, Ethelred," I said. "No more." How foolish I'd been to let the warmth of my homeland lull me into dreams that I'd led a different life. As I descended the stairs, I determined to never again give into such sentiment. As I approached the second stairway, I nearly let out a cry, but then I saw young William standing in the shadows. I pretended to not notice him, hoping against hope he had not heard what transpired. I walked on with my head held high, though my heart felt anything but. Yet in my heart I hoped that it would one day not be my words to the king that William would remember, but my actions. Not the hurt and humiliation, but my resolve to endure in spite of it. I was down, but not defeated, unloved, but not destroyed, determined to prevail. By the time I stepped onto the floor of the great hall, the tears were unstoppable. Where was the one who would comfort me, guide me, and give me strength to carry on? I blindly searched each room. Where was Alwyn? He will support me, I thought through angry tears. He will tell me what I already know. I will not go back to England. I won't. As I passed through the great hall once more, I found my mentor emerging from the chapel. "Oh, Alwyn," I rushed toward him and fell in his embrace. "Emma, what is it, my child?" "I am not going back." "Going back where?" "To England with him." Alwyn's steady regard enveloped me as he put his arms around my shoulders, guiding me to the drawing room. He took out his kerchief and gently placed it in my hand as he seated me by the hearth. He stepped to the center table and poured a cup of water. "Here now," his words gentle as he handed me the cup. I remembered my same words to young William as before. Alwyn pulled up the footstool to sit before me. I took a sip from the cup, then sat back in the chair. I stared into the fire. Flames licked the walls of the hearth as drafts pulled them upward through the chimney. Firelight cast playful shadows against the stone walls, safe from the inferno. "There is something purifying about fire," I mused. "True," said Alwyn, "but there also comes a point in the purification when fire destroys." We sat in silence, accompanied only by the sounds of shifting logs and the hiss of embers. "There is little left for me. My husband betrayed me." I turned my eyes to Alwyn. "And in my father's house." "Emma," Alwyn began carefully, "it is time to see clearly, not with your heart, but with your mind. You have been so strong. Now you must be like flint." I wiped away the last of my tears and looked back into the fire. "You sacrifice love, Emma, but you do not have to sacrifice the future." Alwyn paused until I met his eyes. "Edward and Alfred, heirs to the throne, they are your future." My eyes traveled once more to the great tapestry over the mantel, the red shield with the lions of Normandy. This foolish king does not realize he has opened the gateway by which the Normans have entered England. Alwyn kept still to allow his words to sink into my mind. You, Emma, you were brought into his kingdom for such a time as this. "Alwyn, forgive me, but I—" He stood abruptly. "Emma, come over here." Alwyn walked toward the chess table. "You want to play chess?" My life was falling apart, and he wanted to play games. "Yes," he said strongly. I shook my head. "Emma, you believe you've reached an impasse. Resolution seems impossible, a no-win situation." I nodded in defeat. "This is what often happens in chess, does it not? You have to move whether you like it or not." I looked up at him with a tilt of my head. "We will play till conclusion," his tone firm. "If you remember nothing else I taught you, never play without conclusion. Play to win." The devastating encounter of an hour ago began to fade from my mind as I focused on what was before me. "All right, my dear tutor," I gave an edgy smile. "You may have taken on more than you bargained for." Alwyn patted my hand. That's what I wanted to hear. We chose our sides, then sat down to begin the game. "All right, Emma, what do you see?" "A game of strategy, of war, of conquest," I answered as if I were at my lessons. "The king, the queen, the knights, the bishops, and the earls, and the pawns, of course." Good, good. And of all the games we play at court, what is the secret of this game? It leaves nothing to chance. The outcome is a result of the moves I and my opponent freely choose. Excellent, he said. And which piece is the most powerful on the board? The queen. Alwyn nodded with a slow steadiness. In this game of men, Alwyn brought me back to the battlefield, there is only one woman on the board, no limits to her moves. The queen is a reflection of royal power. He paused to wait for me to look up. And her goal? Twofold, I said. She must check the power of the enemy and capture the rivals who oppose her. We began to move our pieces in turn. Then he held his queen in the air. Yes, Emma, the queen must survive. If she's captured, the outcome of the game is in question. The fate of the kingdom is in jeopardy. Do you remember when I taught you the move, queen sacrifice? That sometimes the queen must take a fall to give her side the more tactical position. I lifted my bishop, then moved it swiftly within striking distance of his queen. The familiar twinkle in his eye returned. Never forget, my child, when the game appears to be won, it can be changed by just one move. I tapped my index finger against my lips, then moved my bishop to protect my king. And then his knight took my queen. He set the piece down next to the board and folded his hands. The immortal game, my child. But know this, Emma, the strategy, the moves, and the choices you make in the mortal world have immortal consequences. The mistakes are there, waiting to be made. Stay on your guard. Never forget, my child, one either gets lost inside chess or outside it. Make sure you are inside the game. I studied the board to determine my mistake, then looked up at a smiling Alwyn. Not only had he taken my queen, but he had set the stage for my defeat. I did not want to lose, but I had no safe square to move my king, no piece that could block or capture his queen. When we struggled for control of the center, our position seemed even. Now it was futile. I moved my knight to block his bishop and sat back with a scowl. Tactics, Emma. Strategy. Alwyn met my eyes. It is always the last blunder and the ability to see it that determines who will win. He paused. Checkmate, my dear. I said nothing as I looked out the north window toward England. Alwyn broke the silence. Emma, you did not enter this game by choice, but you have played it well. You are a pawn, no more. Your children, however, are. They are in the game, but they have no real power. I looked at him oddly. You are the first English consort to be called queen, the first to be titled Queen Mother. This is something time itself can never take away. Your father compelled it, but you ensured it. I looked down with a small smile. You are a Norman, Alwyn said strongly, perhaps the first Norman to reach these heights. He smiled with his familiar twinkle. Quite a mark, I'd say. Alwyn picked up 2 captured pawns and held them flat in his hands. These pawns are your children. They will easily be sacrificed if you leave the board. He handed the pawns to me. You no longer play simply to protect Ethelred, for this king has few moves left. Soon he will go the way of his fathers. I looked at the pawns in my hand. Do you understand me, Emma? You're saying the game has changed. Godwin, Alwyn spoke sharply. You play against Godwin. My eyes narrowed as my fingers lightly touched the castle piece, the earl. If you make the right moves, Emma, the game will be yours. And how do I do that? The king may take for granted your great beauty and elegance, but those at court do not. Give grand parties with games, music, and the poetry of grand sagas and brave warriors. You are much loved by the people. They see you as a woman of faith. Keep them on your side with acts of charity, benevolence, and alms to the poor. Become a wise diplomat. Build alliances. Cultivate powerful friends, both Saxon and Dane, for many oppose Godwin and his ruthless ways. All these will ensure your blood will rule long after Ethelred is gone. You have power, Emma, much more than you know, but you must use it subtly. Never let the king and others see your power. Always be seen as protecting the king and the throne at all costs. Be iron wrapped in velvet. A lady of iron, I mused as I leaned forward to rest my elbow on the arm of the chair. The game we played, all but forgotten, I considered the game ahead. I sat back in my chair. Alwyn looked long at me. My child, he broke the stillness once more, your bloodline is at stake. If you choose to leave the game, the pawns, your children, will fall easily. You must return to England. The chessboard is there. The players are there. The game is there. I turned my gaze toward the windows. England is your kingdom, Emma. It is the only one you will have. Fight for it. Alwyn stood, picked up my captured queen, and handed the piece to me. I believe this belongs to you. He stepped from behind the table and moved toward the doors, pausing only to pat my shoulder. As I turned the queen piece around in my hand, I studied its contours. I ran my finger across the edge of its crown, then set it down on the board. I would return to England and fight.
In our next episode, we'll explore the origins of one of the world's greatest cities, a city that could have been a character itself in Emma's saga. We invite you to share the Stones and Bones podcast with those who love history, those who love all things medieval, British, and Viking. Follow Stones and Bones on Facebook and Instagram for exclusive content and to stay up to date on new projects and releases. Don't forget to tag Stones and Bones and use the hashtag SBPodcast so we see your post on social media.